looked at that kind of child element, we're now actually going to look at it in a little bit more of a sporting context in terms of skill development, which will lead it nicely into our sessions we're going to look at on motor skill development. So we're going to look at the difference between performance from learning. So performance is execution of a skill at a specific time in a specific location. It's an observable behaviour and may not be due to practice and may be influenced by performance variables. Okay, whereas learning is not directly observable, must be inferred from observable behaviour. So a change in the ability to perform a skill that must be inferred from a relatively permanent improvement in performance as a result of practice or experience. So you can clearly see there's a difference between a performance and actually that learning process. You know, that performance might be a one-off, it might be due to the variables that are around us, whereas that learning must be permanent improvement in performance as a result of, you know, experience or practice. So the generally performance characteristics of learning skills. There are 5 kind of key characteristics around skill and learning. So improvement over a period of time, consistency. As learning progresses, it becomes more consistent. There's that stability element, the influence of internal and external conditions, so how we're able to adapt. Persistence, the capability lasts over an increased time period, so are we able to do that skill for a longer period of time? And adaptability, to be able to adapt to a variety of performance, contexts and characteristics. So can we perform that skill at speed? Can we perform that skill with, you know, opposition or different environmental variables which are going to impact on that skill? So we need to be able to adapt to each of these situations, and our skill development and learning is, you know, aligned to being, you know, improved over time, consistent, stable, can do it for a longer period of time, and then obviously interchangeable and adaptable. So focusing on this learning element and looking at abstracting rules. So this kind of concept has been around for quite a while. Scientists believe that athletes learn complex technical skills by abstracting key pieces of information from each performance to create rules about how to perform this in future. This allows the athlete to deal with many variations that are possible, you know, in a complex sport skills. So abstracting information from a specific experience to create rules for guiding future behaviour is a way we learn, you know, in life in general, and the way we learn many things. The abstraction principle can be applied to children learning and being taught new skills and it can be applied at all levels. So continuing on this abstracting rule, athletes, when practice technical skills, their kind of brain seeks to abstract the following 4 types of information. So the first, the condition of the environment, so the position maybe that I'm on the pitch, the opposition, the position of the performer at the time the technique was initiated. So kind of key conditions of the environment that we're around, we're going to make note of that. It might be the demands of the movement being performed, so the speed, the direction, the force. Consequences as perceived by the senses during and after the movement. So during the movement, you know, your perceptual awareness will be able to make adjustments to the skill to meet the requirements of what's going on around us, but then we're also able to think after we've completed that skill or movement or that performance, you know, what was wrong with it, how did that feel, what can I do to improve it? All these thought processes are going to be going through your mind as we're exercising and taking part in skills and sports and, you know, general learning across all the board really. And then finally there's a comparison of the actual outcome with the intended outcome based on available feedback. So that's kind of what I've already touched on a little bit. We actually can compare maybe, if I was that long jump example that I gave earlier, you know, if I did a long jump on it and I continually, you know, performed that skill in practice, and there were certain variables which made me achieve a longer distance, then I'm going to take on board that information. What did I do during take-up? How fast was my run-up? What was my stride distance? All these kind of key variables are going to be enable us to kind of get feedback and information from that performance and help us improve in the future. Okay, so focusing on those abstracting rules and kind of continuing on this information processing theme, we're going to look at that in a practical context and what that means, and hopefully this gives you a little bit of a better understanding of it. When we perform a skill, there are many decisions to be made. So let's give you an example which you know would be applicable to you in a football context. So for example, if I was taking a shot at goal in football, we must decide, firstly, when I receive the ball, am I going to shoot? Or am I going to pass? Am I going to dribble? That might be my first process. I've decided to shoot. Then I'm going to be starting to think where I'm going to aim my shot, how hard to hit it, what direction, where the opposition are positioned, where the goalkeeper's positioned, where to position ourselves during and after the shot. So this following diagram shows the process involved in making this decision. So the input might be that we received the ball. The stimulus is identified. We're then going to decide a response selection. Right, are we going to shoot? Are we going to pass? Are we going to dribble? Which direction? And so forth. So my response selection is I'm going to shoot is the first point. Then I'm going to be starting to program in my response, taking on board all the key information and external factors that I've mentioned to then result in my successful shot on goal, hopefully to score a goal for my team. And that's the output. So I'm obviously learn from that experience. So obviously if we're successful in that movement and the goal is scored, that will trigger a thought process in our mind and our brain and we'll learn from that. Obviously if we're unsuccessful, and we'll take back information and feedback sensory from that and then possibly alter our behaviour in the future. So taking this kind of information processing into a theoretical context, the model completed by Whitings is basically what I've just gone over. And there's three main stages. It's the perceptual mechanisms, which is the information is brought in from the environment and analysed. The translatory mechanisms, this uses the information to make a decision on the skill to be performed. The effector mechanisms, this is selective movement is sent to the muscles via the motor nerve. Importantly, no movement occurs until the effector stage, so that's when we actually complete the movement. After a decision has been made, the body performs the skill movement using its effectors. So as you can see, that input, those key three stages, output, and then obviously we obtain feedback from that movement. So for you as a coach, you might want to be thinking when we're working with young children, think about this process of input, perceptual, translatory, effector mechanisms, how we can, break our practices down and the coaching that we do to make sure that learning is occurring and we're aiding that process rather than inhibiting it. I'm going to touch briefly on that kind of skill, which obviously impacts and is a part of learning. We're going to obviously look at this in a greater detail next week when we look at motor learning and motor skills in general. But it's firstly important to kind of bring into about what a motor program is. So basically, it's a complex set of rules that, when called into action, permits an athlete to produce a movement. So that movement I talked about of shooting a goal is a motor program. Once the movement is initiated, the basic pattern of action is carried out, even though a wrong movement may have been selected. So my shot might be, I might have last minute decision after I've taken the shot, thought, that pass was on, that might have been a better scenario, there's a defender in the way, X, Y, Z, there's multiple scenarios. Although minor adjustments can be made in the basic movement pattern as it's being executed, but the pattern itself cannot change. So quite a good example, I think, is in baseball. So in a baseball swing, once you've initiated that swing, we've completed the basic action. But, as we're taking on sensory information and sensory feedback, we can adjust our bat or our body to react to the ball's movement. Obviously, this very much depends on the type of pitch. Someone's so fast that you can't even see it to get that sensory feedback. But it's about taking on board sensory information when we're performing that skill to make minor adjustments. Many factors affect athletes' learning motor programs. So we've touched on this obviously already, that maturational levels, that their development may impact, their pre-existing talent, experiences of the skill or sport, their motor and cognitive intelligence, and the ability to concentrate, and obviously their overall motivation. So all those key factors are going to link to how well, children and athletes perform these key motor programs. Learning is also influenced by what you do and how you teach that technique, how you shape your practice and activities, but also how you give your feedback. So I mentioned about that positive reinforcement, that is going to, help the learning process. The way we question and the way we put practices together, depending on the age group and maturational status, we might look at delivering in a slightly different way for different groups of people. Hopefully this first kind of area is kind of giving you a little bit of an insight into introduction to learning in context of kind of key learning theories. As I said, there's a plethora of information out there in terms of learning, which can be, found from coaching and sporting context, or even just educationally through educational textbooks on learning and learning development. I've obviously given you an insight into the focus of, athletes, skill, learning, key concepts of working with young children and children and the way that they learn. Now we're going to move on to stages of learning. I'm actually going to embed some YouTube videos for you to watch to give you some practical application of these key stages of learning. It's really important as a coach to understand when we're working with children and youth what stage of learning that our performers are at, because that will help us inform our practices and the way that we work.